This week, coordinated attacks on two critical security points in Owerri. In Owerri, Imo State, I should say, by gunmen forced the hands of President Muhammadu Buhari in firing Mohammed Adamu as Inspector General of Police. His replacement with Deputy Inspector General of Police Alkali Baba, and that according to a report by a Right Sister outfit to this day newspaper. The report said the president was so angry with the audacious assaults on the Imo State Police Command headquarters, where the several operational vehicles were burnt down at the Owerri Correctional Center, where the assailant reportedly released 1,884 inmates from custody. The former Inspector General of Police, who was on the spot assessment, was there for an on-the-spot assessment of the scene of event, was in Owerri when his tenure was terminated. It was due for retirement in February, on the 1st of February, I should say, but President Muhammadu Buhari extended his tenure by 3 months, and he had about 27 days to the end of the extended tenure before this development. The extension triggered national outrage with some citizens challenging the action in court and describing it as illegal. So this has finally come up to roost. We've been talking about insecurity all this while. Voila, Owerri happened. Did he have to take Owerri to happen before the president changed his mind on the IG?
It appears that it did. That's what it took. And yes, you mentioned the court cases that were instituted by aggrieved Nigerians, and you'll recall the statement given by the lawyer of the now former IG that his tenure can be extended to 2023. Well, that's not going to happen at this point. But already there's a lot of disgruntlement because the new gentleman, Alkali Baba, who's the new acting Inspector General of Police, is from Yobe State. You'll recall Mr. Adamu was from Nasarawa State, and he succeeded a gentleman, Ibrahim Idris, from Niger State. So the thinking is, why are they all of northern extraction in quick succession when this is a country that has at least 250 ethnic groups? Why is it concentrated in the north? And this is something that continues to haunt the Buhari administration. This perception, real or imagined, of nepotism, of lopsided appointments. And it would have been nice, because one of the tenets of democracy is accountability. If the president would have paid a listening ear rather than just dismiss it and continue down this path. Obviously, there's an argument that it's who he feels is meritorious, it's who he feels he can trust, especially at a time like this, such a crucial time. But at the same time, we also have to be sensitive to the diversity in this country. You'll recall as well when the service chiefs were, appointed, the newly appointed service chiefs, people were relieved that 2 were northern, 2 were southern. There seemed to be some kind of a balance. So for me, it seems like a step backwards. But ultimately, all we really need is for people to perform. And I think that's what the president is signaling here. What he's interested in is performance. This incident that went on in Owerri, this, like you used the word, audacious, and it's actually really frightening. The president has to be seen to address it. And it's obvious. Not that we'll be blaming him for, sticking his head in the sand like an ostrich. So he's come out and he's done something really grand to address it.
Dr. Abati?
Well, clearly, many Nigerians would be pleased, I guess, that the president has eaten his own words. Because more or less, that's what has happened. You recall in February, when on February 4, the president decided to extend the tenure of the now former Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu. Many Nigerians, in fact, the majority of Nigerians had argued that this was irregular, this was against the law, and that this was unacceptable because the gentleman had already reached the age of 60. He had already spent, the statutory number of years, 35 years that you spend in office. Either you attain the age of 60 or you do 35 years and then you go. Another time, the argument was that the president had no clear justification to retain Mohammed Adamu in office. However, the counter-argument from the government side was that, okay, maybe the president still has an assignment for him that he wanted him to, carry out and achieve in the light of the level of insecurity in the country at the time. But 27 days to the end of that 3 months extension, everyone was convinced that Mohammed Adamu was not able to make any difference. Instead, under his watch, the situation was getting very bad. And now the president, I say, has eaten his words because he has now had to go back to the position of Nigerians as at February 1, 2021, which is that, look, Mohammed Adamu was not able to make any difference. It's not about performance. It's not, he cannot do it. And the Minister of Police Affairs confirmed this when, in announcing the appointment of Baba yesterday, pointed out that the president has taken this step in line with his determination to ensure security in the country. Okay, Nigerians clearly were ahead of the president. As of February, Nigerians thought that, look, this Mohammed Adamu as Inspector General of Police should just be allowed to go. It has taken the president more than 2 months to get to that same position. So the removal in itself, is some kind of vindication for the position of Nigerians. And the statement made by the Minister of Police Affairs that this is part of the attempt to rejig security is also a condemnation of whatever Mohammed Adamu was able to do or not do within the period of that extension. That is the first point. The second point is that many Nigerians have linked this to the situation in Imo. It's not just Imo. The non-performance is colossal. The incompetence is embarrassing. Even in the face of, the former Inspector General of Police going to Owerri and saying that he will do everything possible and that people should be fished out, and using the opportunity to sustain his position, that this has been done by criminals, terrorists, whom he identified as IPOB and the Eastern Security Network. He was still in Owerri when he got fired. So that puts some kind of closure to his tenure. Now, the new man that has been appointed, we're told, many Nigerians have said, yes, why appoint another man from Yobe? But the Minister of Police Affairs quoted Section 7 of the Police Act 2020. And he said this has been done in line with the order of seniority, merit, competence, whatever. Okay, but he just happens to have come from Yobe State. Now, in one account, I don't know, these policemen, you never really know their date of birth. I don't know why that's a problem in Nigeria. If you go by the date of birth of this new IGP Baba, you probably should stay in office till 2023.
Yeah, 2 years.
Right, 2 years.
58.
But in another account, we're told that, he will leave next year. But if you look at the time that he joined the service, so there's so much, 1988, March 15, 1988. That was when he joined the service. You don't see that correlation. So when exactly is he going to leave? Okay, that's the point. And then again, would the Police Act of 2020 apply? Because Police Act 2020 talks about 4 years.
Yeah.
Will the president extend his tenure?
Okay.
But in terms of his credentials, he has the relevant experience.
And most importantly, will a new IG stop the insecurity in the country? That's the biggest question we normally ask, because that's all on News and We'll take a short break. When we return, we have Rotus Odiri and Michael Wilson at this one. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Dependable Rotus Odiri is here. Rotus, how are you?
I'm fine. Fine. Good morning to you. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, viewers. We're primarily focused on the IMF revision of its economic forecast for not only the globe, but also particularly in Nigeria. So if we take a look at that global forecast, we'll see that they essentially, you can look at the entire globe, the global economy, 6.6% growth for 2021 from the contraction of 3.3 in 2020. But in the middle of your screen, to the right of Latin America and the Caribbean is sub-Saharan Africa. So you're seeing 2021 growth of 3.4%, their forecasts, and 2022 of 4%. We look at Nigeria specifically at the bottom of your screen. Circled in red was the 2020 projection of minus 1.8%, and then you've got 2021 2.5% in yellow, and then in 2022 circled in green is 2.3%. You can see South Africa below, we're at 3.1% for 2021, 2% for 2022. Now the thing is, there's a concern that the IMF had, and that concern was with respect to divergent recoveries. If you take a look at this, I really like the analogy here. They're using a railroad tracks going going in different directions. And the metaphor is for the difference between developed economies and developing economies, saying that, look, this recovery, it's still uncertain and it's primarily dependent on the vaccine rollout. And they're essentially saying that developed economies, look at what Joe Biden is doing in the United States. He has surpassed his 100 million jab target and is now aiming for 200 million jabs. That is not the same situation that we're seeing in emerging markets, your Nigerias and South Africas and so on and so forth. So there is a concern about divergent recoveries. They also talked about interest rates, and this is very interesting. With respect to interest rates and capital flows, what they were saying is that if you see growth that spikes in developed economies that leads to interest rates increasing, what we'll see is capital flows leaving emerging markets and going towards the developed economies. Now, that, of course, is going to force, like a Central Bank of Nigeria, to hike interest rates in order to try to bring capital back into the country and also to head off inflation. Now, of course, Jerome Powell has said that he's going to let inflation run for a little while. They're not going to hike rates, but the IMF put this up as one of their concerns. A second concern was about the post-COVID recovery for emerging markets, leading to adverse consequences for developing markets. And here's an interesting example. Let's look at iron ore. Iron ore is one of the main components of steel. Iron ore has increased by about, now it's funny, that's the price at the top right. It's $167. It closed at $167 a ton. So the bottom left, it was about $82 a ton in April of 2020. So it's up by about 166%, right? 166% growth, primarily because of China. China has been, because in their post-COVID recovery, has ramped up and driven up iron ore prices because of the amount of steel production that they've been going through. So the steel production, China, of course, is one of the biggest consumers of steel. And if you look at the top 5 steel producing countries, I think it's Australia, Brazil, China, India, and I think Russia. So Australia's iron ore China exports was $120 billion in 2020 alone. I mean, Australia is the population of Lagos, about 26 million people in Australia. So China's demand was Australia's gain. However, for Nigeria, it's a different story. Look at this tweet from a gentleman named Wale. This is totally unrelated, though. He's talking about affordable housing. He says, look, March 2020, cement price 2,600 naira a bag. Steel, 234,000 naira per ton. March 2021, you can see a 36% increase in cement and a 62% increase in steel. Remember, and of course, okay, at the bottom there, it says affordable housing. By the way, if you don't know, when people use a capital letter and a small letter and a capital letter and a small letter, they are mocking a phrase that's been used. So he's mocking essentially Nigeria's affordable housing goals, because he's saying that how can you achieve affordable housing when cement and steel are going up? Now look at this next tweet from this gentleman named Ife Benz. He says the increase in the price of steel is as a result of the increase in the price of iron ore in international markets. It has nothing to do with inflation in Nigeria. Then Wale comes back, are you suggesting that steel is immune to local inflation? He then comes back and says, I import and sell steel materials. Local inflation is not our problem. Our price increments has nothing to do with inflation. It's dictated by what's happening in international markets. Now he's wrong because, I mean, he's partly right that it's international markets, but because of the law of one price and purchasing power parity, the exchange rate pressure ties into inflation. But the wider point I'm trying to make here is that the IMF is saying that expansive growth in other economies in developing economies, using this iron ore example with China, can impact us. But the thing is, the IMF also said that your policies have to help you get to where you need to go. So Nigeria, it has to benefit from China's demand for steel and iron ore, like Australia has. Nigeria has to develop our mines and steel in order to do that.
But you're correct, Rotus. You're correct. It's indicative. When we had the third industrial plant growth in this country, we set up steel companies. DSC, Owerri Alaja.
Right.
What happened to DSC? DSC is decrepit. They sold it to some Indians. Nothing can come out of it. What happened to Katsina Rolling Mill? What happened to Ajaokuta? So how do you want to compete on the international market? Look at other economies. Look at Britain, fighting so much for British steel, to keep British steel alive, because they know there's an ecosystem. We've been talking about Liberty. It's a steel company.
Right.
But the ecosystem for steel we're supposed to create here, some people just ate off the money. We can't see anything for it, and you expect that growth to come. You're talking about Australia. Australia has been able to position themselves because of the adjacency to the Chinese economy.
Right.
That's why Australia has had over 20-something% year-on-year growth, economic growth.
Right.
You're even talking about steel. You know what Australia is doing in copper?
Exactly.
You know what Australia is doing in copper?
It's incredible.
To the Chinese economy. You know what Australia is doing in agriculture?
Right.
You know what Australia is doing in beef, meat, and all of that to the Chinese economy? Right. Just by the spirit of adjacency, just by the geolocation of Australia to China,
right.
They've been able to I think for IMF, IMF shouldn't deceive us too much in this part of the world.
That's the point, right?
I think IMF is deceiving us. They should scale down these growth expectations. Yeah, it might be the same for China.
Right.
It might be the same for other parts.
Right.
But is it now we're going to increase interest rates with what is happening?
Right, exactly. That's another thing. So
IMF,
we're cutting it to type.
Not now.
Got in a tight spot. They also talked about unemployment, and that unemployment is a major concern for emerging market economies. This is a Financial Times article from a few days ago. Nigeria's graduates live hand to mouth as job crisis worsens. The IMF also said that for emerging markets, they need to make sure that unemployment is a major concern because people who have been out of the labor force for a long time have trouble getting back in. So I just wanted to temper the fact that even though they've revised our growth expectations for Nigeria to 2.5%, which, by the way, is still under 2.7, 2.8% population growth, there are still a number of concerns that the IMF puts in their reports that emerging markets like Nigeria and South Africa have to be wary of.
Well, Rotus, the IMF saying 2.3% growth. The point I was going to make was precisely what you just pointed out about population growth. If our economic growth is below population growth, of course, there's a problem there. And the big question to ask is that, look, once upon a time in this country, the Nigerian economy grew at about 6%, 7%. Yep. I mean, the biggest economic growth, highest economic growth recorded in Africa. Right. So what happened? Now, consistently, since 2015, we've been having the government giving excuses, right? Okay, beyond giving excuses, they've come up with all kinds of economic growth plans, right? Economic recovery growth plan. Right. You've also had the president setting up an economic advisory council to replace or rather to complement the National Economic Management group. Yeah. Now, why is it that there has been no difference? And I do not think that, the natural thing or the right thing to do is to continue to blame COVID-19, right, because COVID-19 now has become the alibi for non-performance for many economies. So on the basis of this, 2.3%, well, I mean, the economists themselves, they've told us that even if at that level, we're not going anywhere. Right. We should be looking at double-digit economic growth, yep, for this economy to be of any sense to anybody. So what strategy does Nigeria have in place? What is the kind of advice that the president is receiving? What is the president doing about, all the indices that you have talked about on this program? 17.7% inflation rate, 33.3% unemployment rate, and all of that, So that should be the focus. Not necessarily IMF telling us, okay, this is what we expect. What Nigerians expect is not statistics. Right. What they expect is an improvement in their lives.
Tangible growth.
Yeah, that's it. Right. And in any case, you talk about divergent recovery. Yes, the recovery is bound to be divergent. That's common sense, because there's no one rule-fits-all model, right, even in economics. Some economies will do V growth, some will do U growth, some will do L growth. The basic challenge is about leadership, right, in various countries. And you will see that those countries where there is quality leadership will recover much better than those countries where you have, people who do not know their left from their right in charge of governance. That, for me, I think, is the basic issue that we need to worry about.
Definitely.
What I'm worried about is what the report refers to as a legacy of vulnerabilities. Just as Dr. Bati was saying, it's all down to leadership. It is extremely concerning. And then also to go back to the earlier point that you were making about cement and steel and what have you, Chapter 3 of the report focuses on the effect of COVID-19 on the real estate sector. That was also very interesting. And again, leadership, policy making. That's really what it boils down to.
Indeed, and we don't have much time. We have to make sure, because the gap between the developed economies and the emerging markets is going to widen based on how quickly the respective countries, as Doctor just mentioned in divergence, how quickly the respective countries recover. So we have to worry about the widening gap between both the developed economies and the emerging markets.
And you know the sad thing, Rotus? COVID was supposed to be the great leveler. I mean, if you've read this great book by Walter Scheidel, it's called The Great Leveler, about how watershed moments level the economies of the
playing
world.
field, right.
Yeah, but it has created a great divergence.
Exactly.
I just hope we're thinking. All right, thanks so much for your time. Rotus, really appreciate you. Moving on to business update now. Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Michael?
Good morning. Yeah, a bit of a pause for breath, actually, after that frenzied activity yesterday. US markets went to near record highs and all the rest of it, as you know. You've touched on the International Monetary Fund. Yeah, I mean, I am with you on that. I think you're absolutely right to make those kind of observations. I tell you what, though, if that had been... If my company had employed somebody to make those kind of forecasts, how did they get it so wrong? We rejoice in the fact that things are going to get better, but they completely get it wrong, and they get it wrong all the time. However, I absolutely join in with the agency warning that recoveries are diverging dangerously within and between countries, depending on governmental skills in getting their way out of the pandemic. Of course, absolutely. What else can you say? But they consistently get their forecasts wrong, and they have to correct them all the time. That's the IMF. Asia, then, a relatively quiet day as far as data's concerned. Australia, their services industry doing extremely well. Royal Bank of Australia on hold, quite honestly, as far as interest rates are concerned. But the imminent commencement of the long-awaited Australia-New Zealand travel bubble should keep both their respective currencies actually purring. As far as Asia is concerned, the big one there is the Reserve Bank of India. Despite the resurgence of COVID-19 and the fact that Goldman Sachs has lowered its growth forecast from 33.4%, that's enormous, isn't it? Down to 31.3 year on year. India reported 103,000 new cases over a 24-hour period yesterday. China goes digital. Now, we know this, but it's leapfrogged much of the developed world in the establishment of its digital yuan. Central bank digital currencies are being flirted with by central banks around the world. US Federal Reserve's obviously taken a slightly more deliberate approach. But what this does is, and it's still a very, as economists would say, a fairly sort of sparsely populated world of digital currencies, it takes a society that already leans heavily on electronic payments. And what it allows them to do, it gives them a very good insight into their citizens' patterns of spending, which is actually absolutely huge. And also, of course, what it does is it puts the yuan further up against its competition with the dollar, which is enjoying at the moment its status, obviously, as the world reserve currency. A lot of international commerce is actually denominated in dollars. But trust me on this, the yuan is catching up fairly fast. Asian equities remain positive, therefore, as I say, a bit of a sideways session on Wall Street, a bit of rotational stuff out of high tech and into other kind of things. Nikkei up about 0.3, the Kospi up a half, and Australia, AX 200 and all ordinaries climbed 0.5%. They've got solid data, travel bubbles, firm commodity prices, if you've just been talking about. So all those kind of fundamentals are driving markets rather than guesses about where the world economy is actually going. To the United States, Jeff Bezos, at the last count, I think still the world's richest man, has backed Joe Biden's tax plans, saying that, this rise of corporation tax we were talking about yesterday from 21 to 28%. He actually said he supported Mr. Biden's focus on infrastructure, calling on Democrats and Republicans to work together. We recognize this investment will require concessions from all sides, both on the specifics of what included as well as how it gets paid for. And we look forward to Congress and the administration to finding a balanced solution. Now, Grab, this is Southeast Asia's most valuable startup, is set for the largest merger between a private business and a blank check company. SPAC. Grab is a ride-hailing and financial services company. It's merging with Altimeter Growth, which is an American finance company. It'll be the biggest SPACs deal we've seen for a long, long time. Grab has a lovely audience and a lovely consumer market of 655 million people across the likes of Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Another big one, CVC Capital bids for Toshiba, $420 billion offer, joins KKR. It'll be the biggest bidding battle in Japan's history. Another twist for Toshiba, if you remember. Profit padding in 2015, there was a scandal about that, near bankruptcy in 2017, had the humiliation of its largest shareholders defeating it yesterday. Shares froze yesterday, though, because of the massive amount of buy orders for this, so people actually like that a lot. Let us turn to Europe, and let us turn to the Europe's largest economy, which is Germany. And its finance minister, Olaf Scholz, has said it's good that Germany is actually slowing down. It will have the chance to tackle all the burdens which are coming about coronavirus with better growth in the next few years. No time for tax reduction for rich people or big corporations. So that's the move in Germany. We're in for higher taxes, not the time to reopen the German economy. And that's really sort of adds to this picture that we're going to get about Spain and Italy, other major economies, slow rollout the vaccine in France and Germany, also Italy and Spain. Last month's flash PMIs reflected that. We're seeing service industries very, very weak indeed. Restaurants and bars in France remaining shut, so no recovery in April whatsoever. Very real risk, of course, that Europe's tourist sector, which is vital for it, in other words, people like me and the rest of us going abroad to these countries, we will not be doing that, and we could be looking at a very desperate summer season. UK FTSE domestic stocks actually jumping to pre-pandemic levels, up 1.2%, retail and leisure shares. But despite what about travel, and remember, it's Deliveroo's first day of trading. We've done that story, did it last week, but it begins its first trading today. I'll just draw your attention to the fact that there are 2,755 billionaires worldwide, combined net worth of 9.4 trillion. We've got 85 of them, according to the Forbes list, living in the UK. But according to that Forbes list, all those richest people in the world have actually profited hugely during the pandemic in terms of trillions of dollars actually raised. Commodities, oil sideways overnight, basically, for all the reasons we talked about yesterday, about maybe some production cuts or not coming up in May, but it's all that demand that we're not really sure about. US yields actually lift gold. And I would finally draw your attention to what's happening ahead today, which of course are the FOMC minutes. Any diversion from uber dovishness on behalf of the Fed, and four of those Fed officials actually looking towards interest rate rises in 2022. But any divergence from Jay Powell about his dovish policies will be seized on by the markets, and we'll see ructions, which I will take great pleasure or not, but I'll be reporting on for you tomorrow.
Right, Michael? I mean, I don't really see any diversions because they need to go that way at this point in time. And the things are pretty much looking up for the American economy. But I want to talk about SPACs. I'm quite very, very uncertain about SPACs. Let me tell you what it looks like to me. This SPACs deal pretty much looks like, to me, drinking a cocktail that has Bear Stearns in it and Bernie Madoff in it. That's the kind of cocktail it looks like to me. Because I see they're trying to put some money in that same business Adam Newman bungled. It's called WeWork. The office startup that Masayoshi Son brought in a lot of money, but was bungled. Isn't this SPAC deal reckless? Because this is recklessly going to destroy the markets again.
Every SPAC deal is reckless because what you have to do is, there's nothing new in this. I mean, they're called shell companies. basically, aren't they? And they're finance companies which take a risk about something. The real problem is, never mind the particulars of this one, it's what I've said in the past, is that if you want to do it, then you have to be quite expert. In other words, if you want to invest in it, you have to understand whether the management team's any good or not of the SPACs company itself, and actually have you quite rightly said where the money's actually going and what it'll actually do. And that takes an enormous amount of judgment. And as you know, the regulatory authorities in the United States, they're not actually going to regulate it right now, but they have been asking the world's largest investment banks in the United States what their position is on SPACs, because they clearly feel as though it's like a pandemic. It's a pandemic of greed which is forcing these kind of deals through.
Well, Michael, I thought you would comment further on Jeff Bezos of Amazon. You know, Amazon has been under very severe criticism, even from President Joe Biden during the campaigns, about how Amazon uses tax credits and reductions to dodge the payment of corporate tax. Senator Elizabeth Warren, who is a strong supporter of increasing corporate tax, has also been very critical of Amazon. And now, against the run of play, you have Jeff Bezos coming out there and saying, oh, this is necessary. We all need to make sacrifice on all sides. Do you think he's just being hypocritical, just playing a game, just telling the administration what he thinks that will help his own purpose? Amazon, being in trouble at the moment. And then secondly, what do you think of the future of electric cars? BYD, that Chinese electric car making company that is supported by Warren Buffett, they say, well, they are doing better than other competitors in the market. But when I hear electric cars, I think of developing countries. I think of the future. Do you think that there's really a future for electric cars beyond GM, beyond Tesla, the biggest player in the market, and all these other players that are seeing because electric cars? We don't even have electricity supply on a regular basis in Africa. I don't even see myself maybe using an electric car on the streets of Lagos. So is there a future for electric cars? That's the second question.
Right, Jeff Bezos, I think what he's doing is, I think it's what they call politics, actually, isn't he? He's actually saying, because he knows what's going to happen. He knows that the Biden administration will say, yes, thanks very much, Jeff, but you can afford to say those kind of things. And that's what I would be saying too. You know where Amazon's going, you know where he's going, you know where the administration and the Democrat administration in the United States is keen to break up big tech, and I'm sure they will. So I think we can take what Jeff Bezos says with a slight pinch of salt, if I can put it like that. As far as electric cars are concerned, it's all about affordability and it's all about batteries. That's what it's about. It's not about the shell of the car. It's how much you can actually get it down to what ordinary people can afford to pay. There's a movement for that, as you quite rightly observed in China. We've been reporting on that on this program before. Also, we know that countries with a huge amount of infrastructure change will be able to do it, but it will be very, very expensive indeed to change to electric cars because clearly there needs to be some kind of great change in the infrastructure, never mind the cars themselves. And that infrastructure is not here, not in any developed country that I know of, quite honestly. I mean, there might be some very, very small ones, but I mean, the kind of mileage you're talking about, particularly in countries like the United States and in Africa, are simply not supported by electric cars. So I think they're on the wish list, but I think that the cost of technological change will be enormous.
I'm curious as to why you seem confident in the yuan's prospects as a future global currency reserve, especially since you'll recall that idea was mooted about the euro, and we saw how that turned out.
Well, I think it's what it's deemed a developing story, quite honestly. I think if it becomes the digital currency which is supported by China's huge central bank, the People's Bank of China, then it will be. It's a question of volume. It's whether you have the reason that the dollar is what's called a transportable currency, a vehicular currency, if you like. Sorry about the words, but that's what they call it. Is because people all the way around the world have confidence in it. If you go to any country with some green greenbacks in your pocket and you want to pay for something, people will take dollars. They just do. Now, will the yuan catch up with that? It may well do. It was felt the euro would be in that position. It's not quite, but I think that given if there's a volume of it and there's enough trade going on, it's just a numbers game. As soon as it becomes usable, I mean, if you used it on my high street right now, they'd laugh at you. They wouldn't laugh so much if you offered them dollars. I suspect they'd probably be slightly worried, because we even worry about Scottish pound notes, so that's how insular we are. But I suspect if you went to anywhere in Africa with dollars, no problem whatsoever. Went with yuan, probably not right now. But it's a developing story. Just because it was suggested a year ago and didn't work, don't be fooled by that. It will happen. I'm pretty sure about it. It's a question of where China's advance will be. And at the moment, it looks sky's the limit, basically.
An exciting prospect there. And it's a good thing you said that, because when you look at the word credit itself, it means credire, to believe. So every monetary currency in the world is about the belief people have in them. But thank you so much for that. We go to update on COVID-19 pandemic. This was tomorrow. Some new vaccine candidates in the mix, I'm hearing. Any good news on that?
Well, there's always good news. Science continues to win, but perhaps not just as fast as we want it to be. The global coronavirus cases have actually increased for the 6th consecutive week. And the weekly updates by the WHO epidemiological report actually shows that over the last week, more than 4 million cases have been reported. The Southeast Asian region, most notably India and the Western Pacific region, had the largest increases in case incidents. Brazil, the US, Turkey, France followed India in the highest number of new cases. More than 71,000 new deaths were also reported over the last week, and that's an 11% increase compared to the week before. All regions except the African region reported increases in deaths. The Southeast Asia region also had the biggest increase, 46% actually, in new deaths in the last 1 week. So I think there's an increasing false sense of hope and security as vaccinations are rolling out, international travelers are opening, and of course the new variants are having their way. Here in Nigeria, Lagos was responsible for more than half of the 58 new infections recorded in the last 24 hours. No deaths was recorded in the 11 states that saw new infections. And let's look at the vaccination updates in Nigeria. Over 960,000 Nigerians have now been vaccinated so far across the country against the coronavirus. And although its data is yet to be added to the national system, I can confirm to you this morning that Kogi State has finally commenced its COVID-19 vaccination rollout. The immunization started yesterday with the head of the state's primary healthcare development agency leading members of the Ministry of Health to receive their first jab in Kogi State. The State's Commissioner for Health, Harun Osaka, confirmed that Kogi received an initial 16,900 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, with another batch of 16,900 doses expected to be delivered to the state in a couple of weeks. So at the moment, the entire 36 states and Federal Capital Territory in Nigeria have commenced vaccination. Meanwhile, the Nigerian government received an additional 100,000 doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, courtesy the government of India yesterday. The donation, enough to fully vaccinate 50,000 people, comes as Nigeria grapples with meeting vaccination targets with supply delays affecting COVAX facility. Now, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Boss Mustafa, made the announcement during the press briefing in Abuja. He also announced that, on the direction of the president, the PTF on COVID-19 will now transition to become what is known as the Presidential Steering Committee, with a modified mandate to reflect the non-emergence of COVID-19 pandemic in the long term. Elsewhere out of Nigeria, the European drug regulator has denied that it had already established a causal connection between the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the rare blood clotting syndrome, after a senior official from the agency actually said there was a link. Now, the EMA says a review is still currently ongoing and findings are expected sometime this week. And in the UK, although no safety concerns have been mentioned with this specific study, a pediatric study of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine has been paused pending a review of the UK's medicines regulator, over rare blood clots in cases in adults. Now, over the weekend, it was reported that some 30 blood clotting cases were recorded by the MHRA out of more than 18 million doses of AstraZeneca shot administered so far in the UK. And this is also coming as the WHO announced yesterday that it was assessing a possible link between the vaccine and rare cases of severe blood clotting in the AstraZeneca, with the AstraZeneca jab, actually. Now, the wavering confidence in this particular vaccine is still on, I must say.
Well, clearly, Adesua, yeah, you give the international figures, but the main concern at the moment is that, look, many countries are entering the third wave. Europe is clearly in trouble. France and Germany have had to extend the lockdown. Countries like Chile, Brazil, Mexico are experiencing very, phenomenal upsurge in the rate of infections. Even in India, the COVID-19 crisis is escalating, even in spite of the effort by the Indian authorities to deal with it. So this virus, this pandemic, continues to prove to be a challenge to leaders, to scientists, to manufacturers of vaccines, and to the entire human community, which is why we were surprised the other day that the Nigerian authorities were saying, look, we have very limited vaccines. We don't know, what will happen, so states should put a halt to the vaccination process. I think that we need to be worried about the level of seriousness that we have from Nigerian leaders with regard to this. The Presidential Task Force has been renamed, right?
Yeah.
It's now a Presidential Steering Committee. That's a meaningless title. There's no difference. Look, what we need to see is seriousness in terms of approach. We're told, for example, that what we have so far is just the 3.4 million doses from the WHO-supported COVAX facility. I think MTN contributed an additional 300,000 doses.
Yes.
And in the last 3 weeks, all we've been getting promises after promises. Nigeria will get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Nigeria will also, make some other efforts. We need to see concrete results. We need to see Nigeria moving away from a charity position, looking for donations, to see how whatever money under the Economic Sustainability Program or under the proposal by the PTF originally is used to get vaccines for people. Because if you look at what has happened so far, in terms of response, the vaccine hesitancy level in Nigeria is not as high as we expected. We've seen people, over 600,000 so far, although that is slow, but I don't think that low number is accountable for on the basis of vaccine hesitancy. There will be more than enough Nigerians who want to take the vaccine, and then government is making excuses. As for Kogi State, yes, okay, it's good that the vaccination immunization program has been rolled out in Kogi State after Yahaya Bello, the governor, and his spokesman, what is that one's name now? Kingsley Fanwo, had been telling people that the objective of the federal government or the Center for the NCDC, Center for Disease Control, is to blackmail Kogi State and drive away investors. So it's good that it's the last state. Kogi State is now on record as the last state to commence the immunization program. We don't have information, maybe this is due to the fact that at the end of the day, the cold storage facility in Kogi State has been fixed. But what will give us confidence and make the story more truthful is for us to see the young man who is governor in Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, right? That's his name? Yes. Right. To come out publicly and provide necessary leadership and take the vaccine, and for key government officials to show that, Kogi State is not a mini Tanzania in Nigeria.
Don't hold your breath, Dr. Abati.
Excuse me?
Don't hold your breath.
Anyway, Over to Tundu.
I want to talk about Canada, that is facing a deadly third wave of the virus, to just stress the pernicious nature of what we're dealing with here. Canada, who was named and shamed as the biggest hoarder of COVID-19 vaccines at a time when countries were scrambling, countries like Nigeria scrambling to get vaccines, Canada had hoarded ×5 of what they needed. Each citizen of Canada has 5 times the dosage that is needed. And yet, look at Canada going into lockdown in certain areas, dealing with the UK variant, dealing with the Brazilian variant, such that those variants have actually supplanted the original COVID-19 virus in Canada. So it just goes to show that no nation can afford to relax. Canada, in spite of all their hoarding and what have you, still faces that problem that they do not actually manufacture vaccines in their country. So when there's supply issues, they're stuck. So we all need to continue to be so hyper-vigilant about this pandemic.
And very well said, Tundu, I should say. Brazil, too, is something I want to bring on the front burner. Brazil had one of the largest deaths, in record, since we started taking records of coronavirus. There's over 4,000 deaths in a day. It just shows that Jair Bolsonaro has bungled the process. He has no ideas. He has no leaning. I think women leaders have handled coronavirus better. Countries like Taiwan, countries like New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern, you can see what they have done. And I was talking about New Ray of Hope. There's a certain French biotech company called Valneva. Valneva has done 1 or 2 trials, and they're seeing positive results. So they're going to go on the first and the second phase trial. Hopefully, that should come into the vaccine race. And hopefully, Moderna too should start to deploy vaccines so we can have more vaccines in the kitty for everybody. But we should also stress, you should be careful. You should wear your face mask. You should wash your hands. Because even when you get the jab, all the jab does is it provides an immune response. So what it means is that if you're still exposed to the virus, it just means that you will not be very sick like the virus will normally bring you down. It just makes your body aware of it, provides an immune response so that you can fight it.
It doesn't make you invincible.
It doesn't make you invincible. And I'm deliberately citing this because of the case that happened in Argentina.
The president.
The president, taking the jab and the Sputnik jab, and he went sick. Afterwards, he got coronavirus. It's just because it triggers an immune response. It tells your body that, there's a virus like this, so beware. So your body can fight it when it comes. So for the fact that you have taken jab, because I've seen a lot of people in Nigeria, I've taken the jab, I've taken my first jab, I don't need to wear face mask, I'm immune. No, it's not some, using some local parlance, it's not some virus, odeshi, really. It's a
false sense of security.
Yeah, it's just a false sense of security.
Before you go, Adesua, I think we need to pay attention to what is going on in Europe.
Yes.
I've cited the case of the countries that are already introducing lockdowns. France, Germany, Italy. Yes, we've said before that Europe didn't respond appropriately and early enough, and that they got engaged in vaccine politics and vaccine nationalism. That is now a problem for them. But the EMA, which is the medicines regulatory agency for Europe, had told us before now that the AstraZeneca vaccine didn't pose a problem. They approved of it. But I find it shocking that Marco Cavalieri, that's the head of the vaccine strategy in the European Medicines Agency, that's the full name of the EMA, is now saying that blood clotting among young persons, has a link with the AstraZeneca vaccine. And I think, what we're getting from the EMA, from even the head of the medicines vaccines strategy, is quite contradictory.
Mixed messages.
Yes, but at the end of the day, we hope that there will be clarity, particularly as the EMA has responded to say that the review of the effectiveness of the AstraZeneca vaccine across age brackets is ongoing. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.